All right, hello and welcome to another Expert Inside interview. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP, online sales magazine and Pipeliner CRM, joining you as usual from a sunny San Diego. And today I'm delighted to be joined from, as they like to say here, across the pond, Chris Spratling, who is in Bath in the UK. How you doing, Chris?
I'm good, John. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and Chris is an entrepreneur, business coach, and author of the Amazon bestseller, The Exit Roadmap. Chris has owned and sold multiple seven-figure businesses, helped countless founders prepare for the biggest financial event of their lives, which is selling their business. And today you run the business advisory firm Chalk Hill Blue, where you help owners unlock the value in their business. And that's what we're going to talk about today is how to sell your business for maximum value. So, Chris, when somebody sets up a business at the beginning, um, is that a time when they should be thinking about the exit even that early, even when they're not, even when they're just starting out? Is it a good idea to have the end goal in mind?
Oh, look, absolutely. If every business owner set out with that end goal in mind when they first set up that business, you know, they would have a lot more success further down the line. I'd probably have a lot less work,
Right.
but absolutely. If you had to pick a point when to start, it's right at the beginning.
Yeah. So if you haven't done that, obviously, and then you're sort of saying, okay, I'm looking to sell my business in the next couple of years or whatever. What are some of the common things that you see that maybe people have or haven't done that can negatively impact the value?
Yeah, no, look, it's a really good point. In the book, we talk about the 10 drivers of value.
Hmm.
And the answer to your question actually is they haven't ticked off the 10 drivers of value. So,
Right.
um, you know, selling a business is not about finding a buyer for
Hmm.
that business. It's about finding a range of different buyers who are all prepared to pay a premium for that business. And, you know, buying a business comes with a load of risk attached to it. So by addressing those 10 value drivers, what you're essentially doing is reducing risk and therefore increasing the attractiveness of that business. So, every acquirer is going to want to see, first and foremost, a strong history of growth in
Hmm.
that business. So that's driver number one in a way. But beyond that, you've got to remember that when you sell your business to an acquirer, that's the end of your journey, perhaps, but it's just the start of the journey for the acquirer.
Right.
And so again, they're going to want to see a strong, credible sales story about how the business can continue to scale after you've left. And so building that plan, whether they adopt your plan or not, they need to be able to buy into the fact that there's a strong growth potential still for this business to come.
Yeah.
One of the other things that you're going to want to work on is making sure, rather unsurprisingly, that the business isn't overly reliant on you, the
Right.
owner or the founder. And then, follow that theme on for another two or three different aspects. You want to make sure that, again, the business isn't overly reliant on other key members of staff, so that, if they were to leave post transaction, that
Mhm.
the new owner's business is not at risk. And then equally, you want to make sure that the business isn't overly dependent on any one or two
Right.
key suppliers or key customers, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Um, that business is going to need um, to bear to show that it can differentiate itself, that it has strong USPs, strong brand equity,
Mhm.
and so on and so forth. And then equally, often overlooked, but you're going to want to see whether that business has got strong intellectual property that
Yeah.
again helps amplify those points of differentiation and so on. So addressing all of those, or at least as many of those as you can in building that business to be saleable, is a key requirement really of creating a business that's going to be attractive to potential acquirers.
Yeah, because let's face it, Chris. I mean, there's a lot of businesses that are, as you said, very reliant on the founder or the owner. Maybe those customers, there's a loyalty to that person. Maybe there's not enough differentiate. Maybe they are the differentiation. The people in the business are the differentiation, and these are things that obviously, when you're coming from the outside, you're going to go, okay, the business isn't that well differentiated. They have got good customers, but they're reliant on this group. Therefore, I'm either going to construct a deal that means that they're locked in to stay in the business until we can transition, or I'm going to pass on it.
Yeah, I mean, look, all of those things are real considerations for any acquirer, and therefore, I think if you're going to sell a business for maximum value, I think the first step you have to take is to put yourself in the shoes of an acquirer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, imagine if you stop to ask yourself one simple question: faced with an opportunity like my business, would I buy that business?
Yeah.
Often the answer is, well, no, of course not.
Right.
Or no, of course not for that value. I wouldn't spend that much on it.
Mm-hmm.
So why should somebody else?
Yeah. And how often do you find that that although like business owners, like they're living, breathing the business all the time, how often do you find that they don't have good visibility or good explanation for their numbers, right? Where they can't really, when somebody comes from the outside and starts digging into it, that they don't have the answers ready.
Often, is the simple answer. Clearly there's nothing that's going to put a potential acquirer off more than a business owner or a leadership team that don't know their numbers.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the biggest red flags. The key, I think, for us is putting some of that robust financial reporting in place and having strong, records,
Mm-hmm.
but also coaching owners through the sale process so as to say, look, if I don't know the answer, say, look, that's a really great question. Would it be all
Yeah.
right if I came back to you with the answer rather than try and give you an answer that's half baked right now?
Yeah.
But the basics you're going to have to know for sure.
Yeah, and also, like you mentioned, you're going to have to be able to convince a buyer of the scalability of the business, absent you, and maybe perhaps absent a couple of other people. So, in many ways, you have to lay out that roadmap for them in order to, help assuage some of their fears.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's about telling a story that's both credible and something that a potential acquirer can execute simply if they so choose to follow your trajectory that you've mapped out for them.
Mm.
Now, many of them, different types of buyers will have different criteria as to why they're buying that business and what they want to do with it. But I think in positioning a business for sale, you're looking to attract as many different types of buyers as is practical.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll tailor your story to appeal to those 2 or 3, maybe 4 different types of acquirer.
Yeah, and how important is it for the business owner or the leadership team to get in the right mindset for this? Because, let's face it, if you're a business owner or a founder, you've built this business, it's your baby, it's the most beautiful baby in the world. Now you're going to engage with people who are going to say, it's a decent looking baby. It's not the best looking baby I've ever seen, or so how important is it to mentally prepare yourself for the fact that you're going to be in this communication where people are buyers are going to be picking holes in your business.
Yeah, I might answer it in a circuitous way if I
Yeah,
may.
sure.
There's lots of stuff been written over the years about preparing a business for sale. Actually, I think what most of the stuff that's out there conveniently misses, is a first step. And for me, the first step is getting seller ready. So
Hmm.
as the seller, I think you've got to be really clear about why you're selling, what your motivations for selling are, what you need and want, and they're different things, need and want, I
Hmm.
think, from a transaction. And to equally know as clearly what you don't want.
Hmm.
Because if you don't get yourself seller ready beforehand, then invariably you won't sell for the maximum value. You won't build a business that attracts the sorts of acquirers that you ideally want. And you'll probably end up selling to the wrong sort of acquirer and come away, like many people do, with a sense of underwhelm or regret. So, I
Mm.
mean, some of the stats, I think, from both sides of the pond suggest that, well over 50% of sellers within 12 months will share quite openly that they regret selling. And of that 50%, nearly three quarters will say they think they sold to the wrong party.
Right, right, right. So,
So,
yeah. So I'm saying that that's an incredibly important piece. Is that preparing and making sure that you're in the right frame of mind and making sure you understand. The other thing too, Chris, isn't it like sometimes people don't realize that there are so many different ways that the deal could be structured in the
yeah,
end. I mean, ideally, you go here. Here's a fantastic big check for you. We love your business. Here you go. Enjoy your retirement. But that's not the case most of the time.
well, I think that's absolutely correct and very astute of you. For me, I think just about every transaction has three or four elements to it. So the first one is clearly one of the most obviously focused on ones. It's the consideration amount. How much did I get?
Yeah.
Okay. But as you quite rightly point out, the second factor is the structure of the deal. So, in other words, how much did I get on day one? How much was perhaps deferred or
Hmm.
contingent
Yeah.
consideration? The third element is very much the timing of the deal. So, you know, do I need to do this deal quickly because I've perhaps got health issues and I
Hmm.
just want to get it over the line, or am I prepared to wait, and take a slightly longer view of this process of selling my business to get the maximum value? And then one that's probably relevant for at least 50% of sellers is the buyer's future plans for this business. Now, some sellers will just say, look, it's irrelevant what they do with
Yeah.
it afterwards. I just want my money. But actually, for a large proportion, they've built that business with the help and support of some long-term, you know, staff or team members who've become probably sometimes more than just employees. They've
Hmm.
become friends as well.
Yeah.
And so the buyer's future plans for the team, the business, their legacy ultimately is quite important to them. And so those four factors, I think, are all considerations in selecting the right sort of buyer at the right sort of deal structure and value.
Yeah, and the other thing is, when you're working with sellers initially, they probably don't realize the universe of buyers, that there's lots of different types of buyers, and often probably think it's just one or two profiles. But do you often come across that where there's a greater universe of buyers than perhaps the seller realizes?
Yeah, I mean, look, if I had a dollar for every business owner we meet who says, "I already know who's going to acquire my business,"
Right.
you I wouldn't be hanging around writing books and talking to you tonight, probably,
Right.
John. But look, most of them, as you quite rightly point out, are a little naive to the different types of buyers. We typically think there are five or six different types.
Hmm.
Um, and they're even more naive into the different sort of ways in which each of those different buyers will value a business, how much emphasis they might individually put on the same criteria
Hmm.
as another type of buyer. So most of us only do this once. Most of us only sell our business the one time. So it's incredibly important to get it right. And yet the scary thing is how little um, business owners tend to know about
Hmm.
what's involved with selling a business, and how little they do to educate themselves. So
Right.
hopefully, books and podcasts like this give them a little bit of an insight into what they might want to invest some time into in order to get maximum value for all those years of toil that they put into growing that business.
And how real? What kind of time frame should they be looking at? Like realistically, when they make the decision, okay, I want to sell this business, because obviously most things in life take longer than we would like them to. But and
Yeah.
when you work with people, I guess is the do they often have unrealistic expectations about how quickly the business could be sold?
Yeah, again, I mean, I guess my heart sinks when I meet a business owner who's been perhaps referred to us, who says, "Look, I'd like you to help me sell my business," and we progress to saying when. They say, "Oh, within the next 6 months."
Right.
At which point, my heart sinks. Uh, we can only talk generally, right, here about
Yeah, of
time,
course.
but um, typically we would estimate it takes somewhere between 12 and 24 months to get that business sale ready.
Hmm.
Um, Over the latter part of that first stage, you're probably going to be putting together your deal team, perhaps, if appropriate, selecting a broker or a corporate finance partner, along with commercial lawyers, tax advisors, and so on and so forth. And it probably takes that broker 2 or 3 months to do the research, to put together sales memorandums and teaser documents and so on and so forth, with a view to then marketing the business for sale. And typically, from the point that they start marketing that business for sale, I think it's prudent to expect that it's probably somewhere between 9 and 12 months to get that business sold, contract signed,
Hmm.
first check in the bank. Now, beyond that, as we touched on a minute
Yeah.
ago, some buyers will want you to stay on and do a handover period that's either linked to deferred or contingent consideration.
Hmm.
And so, really, what we've talked about up until the point of the business being sold, we're somewhere between 2 and 3 years.
Yeah.
And then potentially you could be hanging on and handing over for anywhere between 6 and 24 months, again, depending on the size and complexity of that business. So
Hmm.
it's a 3 to 5 year process.
Yeah. And then absolutely, and I think that's something that people need to realize and prepare a long time out, so they're not coming to you and saying, "Oh, Chris, I need to get this sold by the end of this year. Come on, let's do it." And you're like, "Well, it's not going to be that simple."
It invariably isn't that simple. You know, Occasionally you'll sell a business very quickly,
Sure.
and that's great, but it's the exception, I think, rather than the rule.
Yeah, and the other thing you were saying about you have to have good handle on your business and be able to have defensible growth projections for the business, and that's obviously you need to be really careful on that because, as we say, I mean, you may think, oh well, I'll come up with really great growth projections, but the reality is you may be on the hook for some of those because you may have to stay in the business for a year or two. Maybe the deal structure that some of the money that some of the funds that you're going to get are going to be contingent on the performance of the business or whatever. So that piece I think is really critical. Sometimes people think, well, I'll just be as positive and as I can be and aggressive as I can be with the growth projections, but that may actually come back to bite you if they're not defensible and they're not real.
I think that's absolutely correct. And again, I think it comes back to that seller readiness piece
Mhm.
in terms of how long am I prepared to stay on? How confident am I in the future growth potential of the business, assuming normal conditions? You
Mhm.
know, how much do I allow for market change or
Right.
global events that might affect my business, etc., in how um, bullish I'm going to be with my projections going forward. So yeah, it's a balancing act for sure.
Yeah. And then just the last questions. How much do you have to work with the seller just to keep them, help them through the ups and downs? Like I said, I mean, they're selling their baby. There are times when the baby is not going, it's going to be called names by the buyer or inferences. How much of your job is just keeping the seller on track and going, this is normal part of the process?
I think when we get into the nuts and bolts of the sale process, you know, it's normal for any seller to go through a roller coaster of emotions. And so, yes, rather understandably, we'll spend a lot of time reminding them of the process, reminding them of the need to stay focused, to stay calm, to try and answer things carefully and succinctly so as to avoid any confusion amongst interested parties and so on and so forth. So, yeah, look, everybody's different, but typically we do quite a bit of hand holding throughout the process.
Yeah, and obviously it's different for different types of buyers. I mean, if you have big institutional buyers, if they're PEs, if they're whatever, some of the stuff that they may ask of you, you can scratch your head and wonder why, but you still have to give it to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we would typically encourage our clients to do is to build that data room that ultimately gets used in due diligence in the run up to taking the business to market. So firstly, it's all there, and we know it's there, it's robust, it's defensible, we can talk about it openly. That's a key part of the journey on the planning piece, but it's also about making sure that when the business is on the market openly and you've got lots of meetings, hopefully with lots of interested parties, that you haven't got too much work to do at that time other than those meetings, because the worst thing you can do is let the performance of the business dip whilst you're trying to sell it.
Yeah.
You need to be as prepared as possible before you actually take it to market, so as to keep focused on business as usual as much as you would always do.
Yeah, you want to keep the business on its targets, on its growth targets, and everything, because otherwise, you're weakening your position. Well, listen, Chris, this has been fascinating. All of Chris's information will be below this video, but before we go, please do remind people about what you do.
Yes, so we run a company called Chalk Hill Blue, and we specialize in helping businesses scale and scale with a view to an exit. So if any of your listeners would like to have an informal, no holds barred chat, we would love to chat to them.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thanks again, Chris. Thank you for watching and listening, and I will see you all again soon. Thank you.